Ta-da.
Okay, all right, so we're starting at 4:02 p.m. today. Let's just start with attendance. So Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Burford,
Here.
Commissioner Chung,
Here.
Commissioner McCusker,
Here.
and I believe Commissioner Waterbury is absent today. So thank you very much. First off, before you get to you, Rodney, we've got a few other things. We'll check and see, are there any members of the public? Brenna, can you see if there's anybody in there?
Fair enough.
Nobody? Okay. All right, so let's move to the minutes. Did everybody get a chance to review the minutes?
Sorry to interrupt, Brian Waterbury, it looks like is
Oh, good.
in attendance. And
Okay.
then Rodney, if you can unmute when it's your turn to speak.
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Sounds great. So minutes, any edits to the minutes?
I had no edits to the minutes.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
I motion to approve them. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Okay, well, we have our special guest, Rodney. Thanks for joining us. That we really appreciated the time that you came in last year and presented to us in the room, and understand that you have some updates for us. So whenever you're ready, we'd love to hear from you.
All right, sounds good, and I appreciate it. Yeah, so this will be a presentation on the final report. Let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen correctly. All right, so you should be seeing my presentation.
Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, definitely thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to provide you kind of the final report information of what we put together and working with your team there in San Rafael and trying to go through this. And did Chief provide you guys with the PDF of the report?
No, we're going in with just looking at your presentation for the first time, Rodney.
Okay, all righty. So I'll skip referring to pages then if you're not going to have that to look at. But kind of our goal tonight is to kind of just walk you through a little bit of the history and then some of the information, how the report's is laid out, and then just some of our recommendations based on the information. So, if you have any questions as we're going through, certainly feel free to slow me down or stop me and ask those questions as needed. All right, so just to give you guys a little bit of history about ESCI and kind of where we came from and where we are today. Emergency Services Consulting International was founded in 1976, so we've been around for over 50 years, or close to 50 years now. In 2008, we were purchased by the International Association of Fire Chiefs, and so we're kind of now known as the data arm or consulting firm of the International Association of Fire Chiefs. While we do primarily do work in the United States, we have done other projects outside of the United States, mainly in North America and Canada. So there are other projects outside of just the continental United States. And then in 2017, we actually expanded our programs to start including a human resources type of division that handles all of our testing and assessment services. So kind of looking at that overall, what does ESCI provide to the emergency services industry? We provide planning services, which is really where this deployment study falls. So within planning services, we do master strategic plans. We do cultural assessments, risk assessments, all kinds of stuff there. The risk assessment, resource deployment, public safety agency management assessment, and then recruitment testing and promotions. So definitely a very broad amount of services that we provide to the emergency services community. Just to kind of refresh you with some of my history, I started as a volunteer firefighter here in Marion County, Florida in 1983. Went on to become a career firefighter with Marion County in 1990. And then spent 33 years working my way up through the ranks and retired as a deputy chief in 2023. So I've been retired a little over a year, I guess coming up on a year and a half now. I've been with ESCI since about 2019. So roughly 6 years that I've been doing projects with ESCI. That's ranged all across the United States, as well as one project I worked on in Canada. So definitely bring a lot of information. So Marion County, just to kind of give you a picture of what that experience brings to the table. So when I first started volunteering, we were 26 separate volunteer fire departments in Marion County. Marion County is 1,600 square miles, so it was a rather large county and quite a disjointed effort. Once I became employed, and not long after I became employed, then we actually began working towards consolidating all of those agencies into Marion County Fire Rescue. When I retired, we were still operating 25 career fire stations, 6 volunteer fire stations, and 3 EMS only stations, with a workforce of about 700 employees, running about 100,000 calls a year. So we definitely have changed a lot since 1983 when I first started. So looking at the history of the project and kind of how this came to be, San Rafael Fire Department really started looking at some of the things that were going on there in California, and started realizing that they really wanted to kind of do a deeper dive into how some of those things might impact the ability to provide service to the community. So some of those big things were high density developments that were being proposed, such as the Northgate Town Square project. As well as there's been a lot of discussion and proposed plans for adding additional mid-rise apartments and multi-story retirement living homes and skilled nursing facilities. As well as you throw in the RHNA mandate there in California, requiring about 3,000 new housing units in San Rafael. So all of that's like really major, like beyond just the normal. And then certainly the normal and we see this in most communities where there is increasing call volume. And then one of the other things is looking at the relationship with Marinwood Fire Department, and kind of how that's working, since they do help provide services into San Rafael. And then some of the other thought processes that kind of motivated the study was looking at those wildland urban interfaces, and kind of the impact with the wildfires and the potential for that to expand into the city, or how do you protect those residences within the city from that. And then as well as some truck company limitations, looking at the ladder trucks. We'll kind of talk about that more as we go. So just looking at when you get the report, this is just going to kind of give you the outline over the next few slides of what that report's going to look like. So it's going to start out with an executive summary. It's a great little like 2-pager that gives you just the basic meat of the information without any of the details. And then those subsequent sections go into the details. So the next section is organizational overview. And that's where we looked at, what does San Rafael Fire Department look like? How do they operate? How are they organized? What's their chain of command? What's their organizational structure? How do they provide services to the community? And then we look specifically at all of their fire stations to kind of look at, are they in the best places? Are they meeting the needs of the community? Are they meeting the needs of the personnel? And then looking at the apparatus as well, and looking at what apparatus are located where, and some of the longevity, anticipated longevity of those apparatus, and looking at all of that. And then we got it a little deeper into, and we spent quite a bit of time looking at service delivery and deployment. So with that, we really went into a detailed analysis of how many calls the department's running, where do those calls occur, when do those calls occur. And then we also looked at, how does San Rafael Fire Department there within the community compare to insurance services offices standards, as well as National Fire Protection Association standards. That really becomes one of the driving forces on some of the recommendations, is looking at those ISO travel distances and those NFPA travel times. And then we did a really brief look at a community risk review, and looked at what are the community land use regulations, and that definitely kind of comes back to those RHNA mandates, as well as, building codes and things like that. And then we looked at future system demand. You know, what kind of projection do we think that call volume is going to be? And when you look in that section, you're going to see two different models. One that's kind of the lower number, and then one that's kind of the higher number. One's based on just, hey, looking at that, how has service delivery already changed over the last 5 years? And the other model looks at it based on the population, how much we project the population to change. And then that service delivery that as that population increases may do that. And then we spent an entire section really kind of looking at that Marinwood agreement. So what is the process? There was original agreement, then there were the amendment that really has taken a large part of that administration of the agency under San Rafael, while the employees of Marinwood are still providing the operational response from the fire station there along the northern part of the city. So we'll look at that, and that again ends up kind of playing a part on some of the recommendations. And then we had a special section where we really looked specifically at Northgate, since that was one of the driving factors of the project, and looking at how significant we felt that project might be to the service delivery within the community. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit more later. And then we created a section that's just an additional consideration where we looked at, here's some different what ifs that are kind of occurring in the community that could impact that service delivery. So we wanted to be able to kind of summarize those and provide those again as part of the basis for some of the recommendations. And then from there, we get into the recommendations. So we looked at fire station location, we looked at the apparatus, we looked at staffing, we looked at deployment. And in that section, we kind of talk about, you know, at what point do you need to add more staff? At what point do you need to add more units? At what points do you need to add more stations? So we provided some different thought processes, because it's not any single one like, oh, here's the golden thing that's going to say, hey, we need another fire station. It's really a combination of multiple factors. So in that section, we wanted to kind of give you guys, as well as the city council, that ability to, hey, here's some different things to think about. And if there's several of these that are starting to trigger, then maybe it's time to start planning that next step, whether it's more people, more units, or another fire station. And then we finish it out with some challenges and opportunities, kind of looking at some of those things to kind of keep in mind as you're moving forward. And then we do have some recommendations potentially on some station locations, or on a station location. That's in Appendix B, where we kind of blow the maps up a little bigger where we can see it, or excuse me, Appendix A. And then Appendix B is just simply a list of all the different charts and figures that are within the report. So that sometimes it's easier if, hey, I want to look at that ISO mile and a half. You can just click there if you're looking at it on the computer, and it can take you there. So that's kind of a look at the report overview. Do you have any questions or comments so far?
I guess one question I have is, and Chief, maybe this is more for you, is this presented to council or planning commission, or who are the recipients?
The good news is that the city manager has now given us authorization to present this to the city council at a city council meeting, which will occur in either May or June at a regularly scheduled council meeting. And Rodney has graciously offered to attend in person to give the presentation. So we're very excited about that.
Right.
So that not only obviously goes to the city council, the department heads that attend the city council meeting, and obviously the audience members. So
Okay.
it's we're very excited about that, because we hadn't been granted that clearance until just recently.
Okay. Once that's confirmed, can you let us know so as many of us can
Absolutely,
attend?
absolutely. Hopefully, we'd love to have you all there.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Great.
All right, any other questions?
Hmm.
All right. So there were a couple areas, as we looked at deployment of resources where I'm sorry, was somebody?
Just me coughing, sorry.
Okay, sorry. There were a couple areas where we felt like there were some gaps that we wanted to kind of talk about. And so really the two of them really kind of come down to staffing more so than deployment, although deployment on aerial may be a little bit different. So right now at Station 55 and Station 56, both stations have 3 personnel on duty. And if there's an ambulance call that goes down, 2 of those personnel get on that ambulance and respond to the call, which then essentially leaves that zone uncovered by not having a fire engine with 3 people on board to respond to fires or additional calls within the zone. So that means that you end up having to have units from the other fire station zones responding into those zones. So that's one of the gaps that we've identified. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the recommendations. So kind of looking at that from a kind of a thought process, that original plan wasn't for those ambulances at those 2 stations to operate 24/7. It was that they would just operate during those daytime hours when it was busier. But it ended up just becoming practice that it was 24/7. So as of 2023, between the two of them, we're looking at probably 150 incidents per year that the ambulance is responding and within that area or responding and leaving that area uncovered. And as much as almost 4.5 hours that those zones aren't covered by that primary unit, up to 4.5 hours. Some days less, some days more. So that's some of the things that we really thought was a gap in the system. And like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to recommendations. The other thing that's currently being crossed off is your ladder. So at Station 54, you have a ladder and an engine. And so that crew has to pick based on the call, well, we're going to take the engine this time, or we're going to take the ladder this time. You know, if it's a lower level call, let's say a motor vehicle accident, they may just take that engine. If it's a commercial structure fire, they may take that ladder. And what happens with that is it ends up, number one, those ladders are generally much more expensive to buy, much more expensive to operate than an engine. So certainly the more that truck runs where it's not really needed to run can increase your cost. But the other thing that you're dealing with even is that ability to get out of the station in the truck rolling down the road. So if my gear's on the engine and my portable radio's on the engine, but we're going to take the ladder, we've got to all grab our stuff off the engine, move it over to the ladder, which is going to increase that time of getting out the door. So those were kind of the 2 areas where we felt that there were some gaps in service, and we're going to make some recommendations based on that. Any questions on that part? All right, hearing none. Now, the good news is when we looked at your station locations, we really didn't see a need, like a drastic need of, oh my gosh, these stations aren't in the right places. They're not covering the community well. So when we look at just the San Rafael stations and not including Station 58 at Marinwood, 41% of the city is within a 4-minute travel of a fire station. 65% of the structures within the city are within that 4-minute travel. And 74% of the 5 years of incidents were all within that 4-minute travel. So it's covering pretty well. When we add in Station 58, that bumps that 4-minute travel from 41% up to 44%. Those number of structures from 65 to 68%, and the number of incidents from 74 to 76%. So I think realistically, the stations are overall well stationed. They're in the right places, and we didn't see a burning need of we need to go in and build a bunch of new stations or move stations around. So any
Can we
questions?
ask one question, Rodney? Actually, maybe 2 questions. The percentages, you verbally mentioned them. Will they be in the report as well?
They are. So you'll actually see maps within the report, and on that map, so it'll have a map that says, current conditions without Marinwood. And on the legend of that map, you will see those percentages, and then the same thing with Marinwood.
Okay, sounds good. So when you refer to 68, is that Marinwood? 68?
58 is Marinwood.
Or 58, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually it brings up a good point. Throughout the service delivery section, so where we're looking at the 1.5 ISO travel distance for an engine, the 2.5 for a ladder, all of that entire section of maps, we did one map that's without Marinwood and one map with Marinwood, so that you guys and the city council can actually see, here's what we're doing with just our fire stations, but because we have this agreement with Marinwood, this is the benefit that they're bringing to the city. Any other questions?
Rodney, quick question. How much
Yeah.
does like traffic patterns, rush hour density, is that factored in? We have like a commuter train that causes a big backup because it's a railroad crossing essentially. The times could double. If you.
Yeah, it's one of those, and I don't remember what time of day she used as the main basis.
Okay,
That absolutely will change. It's not something that we get into depth within the report,
Okay.
within our
Very-
analysis.
very good. Thank you.
But what I would say, I think you guys have a fairly robust GIS department in the city. They can run these same travel times and do them, like if we know that train comes through at 10 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they could rerun some of these same analysis to where you could actually see that impact difference
Okay, very good. That's
based on that.
that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right, so getting into our actual recommendations and kind of looking at some of the things that we felt to be considered by leadership, by your board, as well as the city council. First of all, developing department-specific response performance goals. National Fire Protection Association puts out first unit within 4 minutes, full assignment on a fire within 8 minutes, on a medical call, first response within 4 minutes, advanced life support within 8 minutes. Those are all great, but they don't always fit every community. So our recommendation is always to, as a department, as a community, what are your citizens willing to spend the money on to accomplish that? So like when we kind of went back to your 4-minute travel time from a fire station right now was sitting at, if I remember right, 44%, including 58. So you're not even halfway there. So as a community, do you want to spend the money to put up 4 more fire stations and staff them just so you can get that to 100%? Does that make sense? When I look at my county where I retired from, a large part of that 1,600 square miles is rural because it's the Ocala National Forest, it's agriculture. It would not make sense for me to have enough fire stations to cover the entire county in a 4-minute. So that's one of our recommendations is as an agency working with your board as well as the city council, developing what are reasonable performance measures within your community. And then monitoring those and watching those and tracking to make sure you're meeting them and where needed, adjusting them. Maybe you get so good at meeting them that it's time to make it a little tighter. So that kind of works from that. Coming back to the gap we talked about at Station 55 and Station 56, we made the recommendation to actually assign 2 additional people per station per shift to actually staff those ambulances. So the 3 would still be on the engine responding to calls, and the 2 folks on the ambulance on each ambulance would be available to respond to those ambulance calls. One of the other things that we identified is during the day, kind of that 9 o'clock to 9 o'clock, we'll kind of throw a 12-hour peak load area in there. There really is a lot more call volume, and that probably has to do with that shift of, everybody's coming into town to work that live outside of the area directly of San Rafael, as well as maybe related to some of the traffic movement. So really looking at maybe implementing some peak load ambulances. And the department's already kind of looking at that as an ability to maybe look at putting up some basic life support peak load ambulances, where you could assign some of those lower level calls and leave those advanced life support ambulances more available. But that's definitely something to consider. And you'll see a chart in the report where you'll see it just kind of go really high during the day and then back down to normal during the evenings and early mornings. Kind of the same thing on the next bullet. We talked about that gap at Station 54 with the ladder, adding the additional personnel to actually staff the ladder to where you can have both a ladder and an engine responding out of that station. And then kind of tied to that as well, right now the 2.5 mile coverage of the community is fairly low because it's just that one ladder at Station 54. So in the long term, looking at that potential of, do you add another ladder at one of the stations further north to help cover, because like right now that Northgate project is not within that 2.5 mile coverage of the ladder. And those are the types of project are the types of buildings and structures where you really want to have that ability to provide an aerial apparatus. So that would be an additional thought, more of a long-term plan of adding another ladder and again, staffing it versus it being cross-staffed. Any questions on any of those recommendations?
So for that last one, would 57 be a potential station, and can that accommodate a ladder?
I think that's gonna be, I think we gave a location that's like probably the best place, and let me see if I can pull that up on my side really quick. Aerial. So we mentioned 57, but I'm not sure that it has the bay space and the living quarters to
Yeah.
do that. So that may be where you kind of have to reevaluate what your options are. And kind of see where you go.
Okay. And then for the second bullet, 55 and 56, so is that 2 additional full-time personnel for each of those stations?
That would be our recommendation. That way you've always got both the ambulance and the engine, like the other stations that have ambulances operate.
Yeah, and that's 24/7, that's not at peak load or any.
That would be 24/7 for those, yeah. I mean, you could do a peak load. I mean, it's certainly, these are just recommendations that ultimately, your group is gonna have to look at and what do you guys recommend? Obviously, leadership's gonna have their opinion on it, and city council is gonna have their opinion on what they feel is the right level. We think 24/7, but we're just making a recommendation. Ultimately, the elected officials and the policymakers have to weigh those things of, okay, how much does that cost versus how much benefit do you get from it?
Thank you.
Any other questions on that page? All right, so then some of the things just of looking at really in kind of monitoring in the system and paying attention as you go forward as a department is really just kind of watching some of these different triggers. And in any of these, like I mentioned before, any one of these doesn't say I need more trucks, I need more people, I need more stations. It's really just kind of these are the different things to think about. So kind of watching that response performance by zone, and you'll see in the report in the service delivery section, will provide you kind of a look at how often does the first truck arriving at that incident within that zone come from the station within that zone versus from one of the stations in one of the other zones. So that'll kind of give you a feel of how well you're covering the workload within each zone. So that's one way to look at that, and kind of a anecdotal, there's not really a standard on that, but an anecdotal look at that is really kind of looking at 75% of the time or better, you kind of want to have that first unit getting there first. So that's just kind of one of those that kind of fits, kind of doesn't. And what you'll see in the study, we did have some kind of weirdness for Station 54 during the time frame where it was being remodeled. So certainly going to see some lower numbers there because it had to come from outside because the fire station was being rebuilt. So you'll kind of see that. And then workload, we look at, you'll see in the report, what percentage of overall time is each unit busy. And really, you want them to be at like that 25% or less number. Once you get above that 25%, those people are getting pretty busy, as well as that means they're not available for additional calls within their zone. So kind of looking at that as well. NFPA travel time. So again, we already kind of mentioned that 4-minute travel time. So kind of watching that and seeing what fits, what doesn't fit. Excuse me. ISO travel distances. So with ISO, there's several. There's distance from a fire engine, distance from a ladder, distance from a fire station, and distance from hydrants, which isn't as big a deal for that. So all that'll kind of pull into effect. And then one of the other things you're going to see in the report is what's called resource concentration or effective response force. So that looks at the NFPA standard saying, hey, we want the full assignment for that structure fire on scene within 8 minutes. So what we provide you is a map that kind of shows here's how many firefighters we can get to different areas of the city within that 8 minutes. And it's going to range, we get 3 firefighters using the Marinwood numbers. We get 3 firefighters there, 6 to 67% of the city. We get 6 firefighters to 54, so it kind of just keeps going. So if it's a major fire, like let's say it's a commercial fire, it's a garden apartment complex or something like that, you really only have that ability to assemble enough firefighters in that 14 or 4% range of the city to get enough there. So that's also one of those areas where if you add personnel to those ambulances and you add personnel to that ladder, that's going to improve this measure as well. You can be able to get more firemen on the scene of that fire within that 8 minutes. And then beyond that 8 minutes, it just means that the on-scene commander's got to make some decisions of which tasks can we not do yet because I just don't have enough people. And then of course another big thing, even just mentioning, 57. Hey, it'd be great if we could put a ladder there, but if there's not a room for the truck and there's not a room for the people, what's our option? And so that's where you look at, do you have the ability to add on to existing stations, or you're already on a small enough parcel you can't do that? Then do you have to look at finding another location? So all of those are the different things that kind of play a part as you're trying to make those decisions of when do we add more? Any questions on any of that? All right. Some of the additional recommendations, just looking at the overall planning process for the department, developing a mission statement, vision statement, and core values. The department used to have that a lot of years ago from our discussions, but nobody really remembers what it is or where it is or kind of what it is. And so definitely a good opportunity to really kind of put together that framework on how San Rafael Fire Department's going to operate. Like here's the things that are the driving force of what we're trying to accomplish and how we're going to do that. So that's definitely, I think, a really critical thing to do fairly soon. Looking at an in-depth community risk assessment, we touched on community risk in a very brief manner in this report, but it's definitely something to really look at from the long term. And it also can be part of as you look at potential for accreditation. And just really looking at where are the risks within our community. So it kind of comes back to some of that wildland urban interface. What are those risks? What are your risks for earthquakes? What are your risks for fire? What are your risks for flooding? All those different things associated within the community. What are the risks associated with that train getting stopped and blocking you from getting to half of the city? And how are your resources on each side of that train track? Things like that. Completing a strategic plan. Once you kind of have that mission, visions, statement, core values, is really putting together that master plan and that strategic plan. Here's the things we want to accomplish over the next 5 years. So that really gives you a set of targeted goals. So that you're not just, hey, they call 911, we get in the truck, we go to the call. Well, there's a lot more to providing service to the community than just that. Are there ways to do more things in the community that are going to decrease the number of 911 calls so you don't need more trucks, you don't need more stations? We see a lot of agencies putting in things like community paramedic programs because they find that decreases some of those repetitive calls from folks that just aren't managing their health well. So you may be able to look at some of that. And that all kind of plays a part between that community risk assessment and that strategic plan. And then we definitely recommend that the city look at that Marinwood relationship. Like I said, right now, the existing agreement with the amendment really places everything other than getting in the fire truck and responding to the call and paying the people that are doing that really falls under San Rafael. In the Marinwood Community Service District just handles like the payroll, the HR for their people. So really looking at how in a long-term agreement could that be absorbed into San Rafael to where those employees, are employees of San Rafael. That way Station 58's people are paid the same as Station 54's people. they have the same benefits, the same insurance, things like that. Definitely makes for a more cohesive operation, while still figuring out how does those two separate funding sources work. The funding from the community service district and the funding from the city. So I think that's definitely something that that the city would be good to really kind of continue to dig into. And I know Chief Roman had already been working on some of that. One of our other recommendations is continuing that kind of work with the insurance services office to really look at what things that they found in their last assessment that could result in San Rafael losing their current class 1 PPC rating, and what steps that they need to kind of put in place within the department to help alleviate that from happening. Because certainly if it drops from a class 1, that does have the potential to increase those insurance costs on your residents and on your businesses. And then the last real recommendation is looking at, when Chief Roman took on the position of fire chief, that deputy chief position that he previously filled was left vacant. From that, looking at that overall span of control and be able to really accomplish all the things the department needs to do to operate safely and efficiently, as well as looking at things like the community risk assessment, the strategic plan, and all these other things. We think it would behoove the city to look at funding and filling that currently vacant deputy fire chief position. Any questions on that? All right, well, that is my presentation, and I'm open for any other questions in general.
I don't know if this is a short answer to this question, Rodney. When we met you in the fall, that's when the study began. And then January, we had these large fires and unprecedented January wildfires in Los Angeles. Has any of that changed any of your recommendations or your way of thinking, since those events in LA?
I don't believe it would change really our overall plan and processes and recommendations. I think that definitely falls under that community risk assessment and that strategic plan where you really, and I think your department's already done amazing at expanding the staffing that's handling a lot of that wildland urban interface, and from the prevention side for those wildfires, you guys are doing a lot to try to already mitigate that and prevent it from becoming as crazy as it can. But I think definitely, as part of your community risk assessment, community risk assessment is going to be looking at those varying weather patterns, looking at the, what's the fire weather and fire conditions been over the last 10 years, and can you predict from that, and looking at, snow melt and all those different things that you guys deal with the mountains and everything else, of how does that impact your community, and what are the things that you guys can do to mitigate where you can, and where you can't, do you have the appropriate response resources ready to handle what could occur?
Okay, very good. Thank you.
One other question I had is maybe for either chiefs. How often do we do this? Is this something we do every 5 years to look at standards of coverage, or every 10 years, or more frequent than that?
Actually, I can't answer to how often we've done it here. I know that we've done versions of it, but there's no cadence to it that we're here in the city. I know that it's part of the ISO, which is every 5 years.
Well, it just depends on what your rating is. If you're a class 1, it's every 5 years. If you're greater than that, it's every 10.
So
Okay.
at least every 5 years, if we strive to be ISO.
But we haven't undertaken this particular type of study that I know of since I've been here.
Oh, really?
No.
Okay.
no.
Yeah, and I would certainly say, whether you use an outside company or not, you really want to update your master plan, your strategic plan, at least every 3 to 5 years, because of those changing conditions. Your society is changing, your demand is changing. We could have never predicted COVID, but we're still dealing with impacts from COVID 5 years later. And so I think, whether you hire an outside company like us or just do it internal, and so like with Marion County, we hired ESCI in 2018. And then since then, we've just been doing some internal master planning instead. But we find that with elected officials, Sometimes they've got to hear it from an outside source, even though it ends up being the same thing the fire chief already has been telling them. To kind of see that, but it does give the fire chief some validation and sometimes seeing some things maybe they didn't see. But our recommendation is absolutely every 3 to 5 years. If your department moves toward an accreditation model, I believe you've got to do some things every year. And then at least every 3 to 5 years, there's some deeper dive into that accreditation scoring.
And the chief has moved us forward on the mission statement, values, vision, and strategic plan. We're out of the gate now with that, and the chief's leading us on starting to put that together. So that's now in play.
Is Commissioner Waterbury, does he have an opportunity? He can't, okay. Let me make sure. Great. Any other questions from the group? All right, well, thanks, Rodney. That was very comprehensive. We look forward to getting the PDF of that as well. And
I can furnish that to them, Rodney.
Pardon me?
I can furnish them with the PDF copy.
Yeah, that's yours. You guys can share that with whoever you want to share it with based on what your plan is.
yeah, that sounds great. And then Chief, we look forward to being at council when it's presented to council once that gets on the calendar.
For sure.
Okay,
Okay,
well, thank you.
Rodney, thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
We really
Rodney.
appreciate it.
All right, thank you guys. You guys have a great day.
All right, bye-bye now.
Good seeing you.
Okay. All right, well, let's move on to the next thing on the agenda, the 2025 Fire Commission goals. So we had talked about this at the last couple of meetings and brainstormed a few ideas. I put pen to paper and Thomas, I believe, sent those out as a part of the package prior to this meeting. Yeah, that'd be great to get one more light in. And so the things, just to recap real quickly, there were a few different areas. One was council relationships. So each member of the commission to meet with a designated council member to just discuss department needs. And we talked about some of the materials that the chief can provide us to inform some of those decisions.
Along those lines, you'll see after my name TBD,
Mm-hmm.
I am in the process of trying to make the appropriate contact with the city manager.
Oh, okay.
She has not responded yet, but
She's a little busy.
yeah, yes, I imagine.
What's her name? Christina.
That's right.
Yeah,
so she's coming to my meeting.
Okay, so. My question to you, Chief, then is like, so they made.
Sorry.
Kind of, generic. I shouldn't say generic, but they made recommendations. And so, how much are you planning to vary those? You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure you have your own plans and it validates what you're doing for, so I would imagine that we should have those in order before we go to talk to people, perhaps.
Well, as I said, we're not demanding anything at this point. We're gonna be very cautious of is that there is increased development that's coming into the town, right? So that naturally increases the call volume. The other thing that even if things stay status quo, where there was no development, we're still seeing increased volume or increased demands on the service. So anywhere from 3 to 5% is what we traditionally would see on any kind of year. But development certainly has it. So there's no, like, right now we're working on the BLS, that part of it. We know that that's a mean to an end to see what other resources we need out there. So we're already working on that part of it. Well, it says 56 and 55. We're kind of already working on that part of it there. For the increased ladder truck and additional engine company, we do need to increase it to see some development to be able to justify those type of things there. So it's all working together as far as the budget and all that kind of process of it. I think, and Chief, if you could just correct me on this, but I think right now, if I could say anything, we're in an education mode phase of educating anybody that'll listen to us on what's happening in the future on there. I don't think, like right now, I don't have a master plan on that this is what we need to fund other than, the deputy chief position, those kind of things on there. But aside from that, it basically is an education of where we're going to be, and vice versa on council, asking them what they want to see from the fire department. I envision that they all probably will say the same thing like that, that the growth is equivalent to, or the first respond, or excuse me, the public safety resources are capable of responding to the demands that are gonna happen in the future on there. But those are the conversations that as you folks are going out there, is basically, rather than us saying this is what we need, more saying, hey, what do you as the mayor, city manager, or anything want to see from our commission on the work that we're doing? Or would you like us to push the fire chief or support the fire chief on what to do? I think that's a far better tactic to use right now. We will get to the point where we're budgeting and kind of figuring that part out and asking for actual type of thing like that. But if I could say anything right now, it really is an education phase on it, because I'm not sure. The last thing we could do is just force something onto any kind of government official and saying we demand this. We're not at that point. What we're saying is we're really we're a really smart organization. We'll educate everything that's happening, and then as we start moving forward and phase into the process like that. So I think that's more or less what I would say about that part of it, is that we're in that rather than priorities, I think we're in the education phase on it.
Okay.
And there's multiple aspects of it. So, I'll talk to the city manager about certain grants that I want to go for that meet certain things on there, either staffing, apparatus, equipment. And so there's that part of it. There's asking for additional funds. The paramedic tax that's going to come up, we're going to have to get aggressive with that. Any kind of development fees from the developers, all that stuff is all being worked on. So it's a conglomerate of a lot of things going on there. And that's why I think that the first phase is the education phase, making sure that we're on board with that. And we have alignment from politicals all the way down to the line firefighter, that there's alignment on where this vision and mission is that we're moving towards.
So would it make sense then that some of these meetings, maybe this is where you were going, John, that some of these meetings with council members maybe happen after the standards of coverage report is presented to council?
Not really, because it really is just standards of coverage. It is what it is. I mean, it's a report out. I mean, we're not doing anything like other than just educating ourselves about it and educating the council about it. The council hasn't had a chance to see this yet because we're still working on that process there to work on that. But we don't even have to bring it up with them, but it's just a simple conversation. Hey, what do you want to see? And we understand there's development. We also understand that there's not a whole lot the city can do as far as imposing fees or anything like that on developers, something like that. But is there other ways that the city officials would, city council would like to see us have this conversation with developers or anything like that? And what can we do as commission to help that process along?
Okay. Any other questions on that?
And we probably will bring, I think we're going to try and align the actual report to council with paramedic tax increase. So it'll be justification on why we want to increase it, because the orders to start doing some work on some of the stuff within the not strategic plan, but the standards of coverage.
Okay.
And really highlighting the point that we should be doing this the cadence of every 5 years, but I'm gonna say that with the development that's coming up, we should be doing it every 3 years. Just because if there's stagnation and we don't see any growth, then I'm fine with 5 years. But if we start seeing some growth, I need to be able to solidify what I'm saying over there also, over to as far as budgeting requests or anything like that.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so that was, in terms of the goals then, that was one of the first things that we talked about, is just each of us building the relationship with a various member of the council or city manager. The second was the Fire Foundation, which I think is something that we've always done. So maybe it's just codifying that, the volunteer activities and supporting the crab feed or any other events that the foundation would need our help with. The third area was public awareness. That's one area that I've spoken with the chief about, and happy to assist just in terms of educating the community just about fire safety in general, and using all the channels that we have, social media and otherwise, to get the word out. And then community engagement is kind of a wrap up for all the different events going on. So it can be department events, city events. We talked about things like the Labor Day Parade or 911 Memorial Service that I think it sounds like that would be an annual thing. And was that at 54? Is that 54? Okay, yeah. The end of year party, Fire Prevention Week, station open house events, a lot of this are things that we're already doing, but it's kind of packaging it together as a goal. And then the final thing was the citizen assistance program, and Chief, that's really, you know, at your lead, pulling us in to help in any way that we can. As a part of that program, just knowing that we saw some examples of that in Los Angeles, I think, where citizens were brought in to help with traffic right when the fires started happening, and the responders needed to get to the scene versus doing things like managing traffic. So just pulling us in any way that we can help with that endeavor, knowing that seems very important. So those were the what is it, 5 items that we had talked about, just if we wanted to set some goals for the year. Does that sound good to everybody? And I'm not sure, Chief Senate,
Oh,
if
no.
do we need to vote on it or anything,
I
or
don't-
can we just?
I don't believe so, no. It's
Okay,
by consensus.
yeah, and we can also add to these if there are things that come up during the year, but I just thought it'd be nice to,
Yeah, they're great.
yeah, to have some things that we could aim for.
So I start checking them off, right? So I have a meeting with Kate on the mayor and the city manager on April 8th in
Okay.
Roma Cafe.
Awesome.
So
Moving in on my territory.
I did, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
But you're welcome to join
Yeah.
April 8th.
April
April 8th
8th.
at 10 a.m.
Yeah,
I'll
sounds
send you
good.
the invite.
I think what we can do is just, you know, at these meetings going forward, when we give the commissioner reports, if there are any updates on the relationships or meetings with council members.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on that agenda item?
So
And
we're
what
gonna
are you
follow those. We're gonna follow those as we on our reports and just say, hey, look, I touched on this, I touched
Mhm.
on that, right?
Yeah.
Is that what we're gonna do?
I think that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
So Ken, what was your agenda? How did you set the appointment?
I just wrote her an email, said, hey, look, the fire. I'd like to read it to you. Fire Commission wants to make sure that we're aligned with supporting you. And in particular with what took place in Los Angeles, you know, whatever your initiative are, we want to be aligned.
So for the commission, I think it'd be nice if we all have the same mantra.
Mhm.
And I think it'd be great if you shared that email with us, so that we're coming across with a consistent message. That we're
Mhm.
all making the same ask,
Yeah.
rather than random making up, what are we gonna talk about today?
Yeah,
That was my point was leading to, should we have some type of
yeah,
But I think what he did sounds,
speaking point?
Chief,
Yeah,
acceptable to
yep.
you?
I think so. I think that's
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, I
think
do
that's,
too.
once again, putting, assisting them, not necessarily us asking for something, but assisting them what they would like to do.
You want to hear it?
Well, I think you should forward us the
Okay.
email so that when we're inviting our different city council folk, it's the same message. We're being consistent with what we want to know.
Chief, did you mention that at one point there were some talking points, or maybe it was related to the mission statement, vision? things
I
like
might
that
have,
that
I
were
just
talked
can't
about?
remember that right
Should
now.
I share that messaging document with,
Oh, yeah, we can share that message.
Okay.
Basically, and this is the messaging document that we have. You're talking about the one related to LA fires and kind of where we're
yes,
at, our status.
the 4 pillars, fire protection, emergency preparedness, wildfire.
Yeah, and that's more like our status where we're at right now. But kind of really, I mean, if you want to share that to the council members, but really like I want to get more of what do they want from you.
Okay,
Mhm.
Type of deal.
Okay,
okay.
But I think we could be, I think sharing that document is not gonna hurt the situation.
Just got a text from Commissioner Waterbury that said that he had met with Councilmember Kurtz on March 7th. Just wanted me to share that with you.
okay,
He's on the meeting.
Dave, you're right, though. Chief, you did say hold off on meeting
Yeah.
with council
Yeah.
until you gave us the talking points that you wanted us to be briefed on, basically.
And I'm not sure if it was after we were gonna go present to the finance committee. Not sure if that, because I thought, what I thought is that we were gonna present on the finance committee. Since we didn't present the finance committee now, which.
We don't need the talking points.
I don't think so.
Hey,
I don't think so. I think I feel more comfortable and,
just
and
kind of
yeah, having a
open forum.
open forum, like an informal conversation with them and see what they, if there's something, if there's
Yeah.
alignment, and if we have alignment, that's great, and if we don't, then you guys can direct me as to maybe some of the things that we can do.
Well, and so I would think that Brian should be submitting to share with all of us what was the conversation that he
Mhm.
had.
right,
not just I met.
right. I think, unfortunately, he's.
No, but I'm
You know,
thinking
the next
you could
meeting.
reach out to him and
Yeah.
ask him for a Reader's Digest of what was the conversation.
Mhm.
It might also give us a show of hand, of their hand on. If he's met with one already, it might be the same mindset that they're all carrying, in which case, if we knew what that conversation was, it
Mhm.
might help us guide the conversation when we have our meetings.
Okay, yeah, okay. I'll ask Brian,
Yeah.
and then, between this meeting and the next meeting, maybe come up with some really brief notes. It sounds like a key goal is just asking them what we can do for them and hearing from them a bit.
But if we can refine our pitch,
Yeah,
it's better.
Like Chief says, we're not there yet, right? This is like. phase
Not
one.
necessarily, I mean, there's no specific things that we're asking for.
But just even the way we ask those open-ended questions,
Mhm.
that if we can come across as a collective force and be consistent with how we're presenting the fire department.
yeah, yes. Yeah, I think that consistency is important, so.
You guys
Okay.
all have my email now,
Thank
and I
you.
sent it to Thomas too, so
Well,
he
you're
had it
good
recorded.
with the schmooze.
Thank you.
You are, you're good.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Any other thoughts on that before we move on to the next item? All right, Fire Foundation.
I'm gonna stop you for just a second. So
Mhm.
on the goals, I think they're all really good as well. There's a lot. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a lot to try and cover this year.
Mhm.
So,
And not all of this may happen, like on the
Thank
community
you.
engagement, that's driven by the events, right?
yeah, yeah.
So some of these things may happen, some of them may not happen, but.
But I thought you wanted us to prioritize, like for 2025, because we're already in the second quarter of the year almost.
Mhm.
What is our number one objective if we're gonna set a goal for the commission? Do we wanna have one thing that we really wanna do this year?
Mhm.
I'm thoughtful.
Right.
Oh, I thought interacting with the community, with the politicos was number one.
Yeah,
So did I. He asked us to rank them and I put that as our number one objective.
yeah,
First one you gotta dive into.
We've gotta have their support.
yeah. And that's also something we haven't necessarily done in the past. A lot of the other things, with the exception of the citizen, force, we're already doing, right? You know, the public awareness.
Right, right.
You know, supporting events, supporting the foundation. So, yeah, if we had to specify there's one uber goal, I think we're probably
Well,
in
yeah.
agreement that it would be the council relationships.
You saw what took place in Los Angeles, all
Yeah.
the infighting and the backbiting, and
We
it
can't
was
have that.
terrible, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you have the chief backed by the mayor and the mayor backed, and they throw in the fire commission for whenever they need it, right? It might help,
Yeah, no, for sure.
right?
I mean, that's what, and that's, like I said, that's a key point of alignment.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then we could do a lot more stuff together rather than separated.
Yep.
Yeah.
United we stand.
There we go.
So I'm gonna say the second goal that I had on mine was support for the Fire Foundation, because it's still very skinny. So I've got one new, I'll jump right into my presentation,
Sure.
but that was my number 2 goal, simply because I know it's definitely needing a big dose of energy. We have one new council board member that's applied to be on the board, and I'm sure the board's gonna accept her. I think she's stellar. But one is not enough. We definitely need at least 2 more board members. And people that want to work on committees to support events for the fundraisers. So I'm still banging the drum. If you know anybody, send them my way. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Chung, any update on the one hundred
No,
fiftieth
no
anniversary?
update. We had lunch with Thomas and the status quo. They are waiting to hear from them before we do anything.
Okay,
No
okay. All right, sounds good. So let's get into,
Oh, I have a
commissioner
question.
reports.
I saw the new badges today on our
Take it,
sheet.
pass along.
When did you receive them? They're beautiful.
Well, we've been distributing them since December, I think. I'm still trying to catch up with everybody. Still in the process.
You know, I should back up one other ask. I hope that you had an opportunity to see it. The Fire Foundation did ask me
Thank you.
to ask for a priority of what they would like to see the foundation achieve as far as a goal for what the fire department would like the foundation to work towards raising monies for. If there's 1 or 5 or 10 or 20, you have it?
No,
Oh,
no, so, I did want to have that conversation with our firefighter union.
good.
Because right now what happens is that you'll get requests from them and you'll get requests from us, from the admin side or the operations side in there.
Okay,
So I do want to get that aligned so that requests are somewhat generated by, that we support each other as far as the firefighter association and the fire chief support each other on the request saying, yes, we as the fire department believe that this is a good request for,
got it.
so.
And when, because they're gonna ask me, when might we expect to see a shopping list?
So I meet with the union on April 1st.
So after that,
Yeah,
so by June, we should have your wishes for what you'd like
Correct.
to see the foundation work towards.
yes.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, let's jump into commission member reports. So Commissioner Johnson?
So I worked on two things. I worked with John on one and I worked with Stan on the other and, you know, that was a great report that those guys did, you know, and I just, one of the things that John and I worked in, I pulled up one of my accounts, right? I just sorted it. It happens to be, they have $200 million worth of property values that you're protecting in this town, right? And then I forgot about Dominican, another counterpart of mine, it's another $100 million, right? So, and I just ran some numbers on that. If you drop from a protection class 1 to a protection class 3, those people are gonna be paying somewhere in the neighborhood of an extra $175,000 to $300,000 a year. Right, those people have a vested interest in your protection class 1, right? And I don't know how you ever use that. Just knowing it in the back of your head, so that's Dominican and the Archdiocese of San Francisco. And I threw in there because you would probably respond to it, Marin Catholic, right? Because they're over the
Yeah.
hill, but if that's burning, you guys would probably respond, right?
Correct.
You've got Saint Anselm, Saint Isabella's, Saint Vincent's, Saint Sylvester's, the women's, the nuns retirement community. You got and CYO camp over there. You've got a lot of those values, and that they're hanging on that protection class. And I don't know whether you guys have this resource with insurance companies, right? Because insurance companies the basis for what they do is protection, is ISO, right? They go, okay, where is this thing? It's in Columbus, Ohio. What's the protection code there, right? It's in San Diego, what's the protection code, right? And all those communities around the United States are experiencing growth. Some are, right?
Yeah.
Like Columbus and those insurance companies, Zurich or Zurich or the big powerhouse ones, right? The reinsurers like, Munich Re, Mitsui, those guys have these tremendous amounts of resources that can come in and help you on your pitch.
Yeah.
Right?
And this is an important point. So I'm glad you said that because I did not know that I have. So one of the things I've been pushing with the county fire chiefs, not just with us, is being able to articulate the and quantifying the negative, what didn't happen by us being here, and what the return on investment is.
Mhm.
And that's essentially what you're talking about here. And this is where, as a fire chief, I don't know how to do that.
Right.
So this is like optimum time to have this conversation. Because along with everything else that's going on there, I need to be able to do that. So I will tell you how many calls we ran.
Mhm.
That's not what I should be saying. I
No.
should be saying to you every year, we saved $2 million worth of stock in something. We saved so-and-so on structure fire, we saved this much. And then on the end, we save some lives and we have so-and-so, the stats, right? The data around that.
Yeah.
So this is a great conversation and this is what I'm now trying to push with our folks in there. We're still a ways from there just because we don't know how to do that. But the fact that he just said that, I'm going like, it's an aha moment for me.
Well, our conversation started as the needs of the city change and we don't keep up with them.
Yeah.
How does it affect a average homeowner's insurance, and that's what initiated.
Yeah,
my
that's what he came
conversation
to
with
me,
you.
but I went to my
And it
clients,
was
right?
great that you found this information because.
And then his report comes in the door and it's like, he goes, he had a bunch of different things, but he goes directly to the baseline, ISO and an NFPA, right? We,
And I would say share with that conversation that you could have with the mayor or with the city manager, that's up to you. That's your expertise right there.
it's up to you. I won't bring that
No,
up
no, I
unless
mean,
you
but-
say it's okay.
But I think that's a great thing on identifying how do we quantify the negative?
Yeah, so we, like, one of my clients, Biomed Zimmer, they just closed a facility somewhere it's in Memphis,
Mhm.
right? Because they lost their protection code. They can't afford to have that.
Yeah.
Right, so it's easy enough for them to move it to Arizona. They're just shipping out of it anyway.
Yeah.
Right, and so you don't want people to close schools or entities up here, right? But there's big four brokers, right? There's Marsh and there's Aon and there's Gallagher and there's Willis, right? Those three, with those big insurance companies, they should be able to come in and give you all the massive amounts of numbers, actuarial numbers that you need.
Huh.
That's what they do.
Okay.
So whoever, they should be working with you. Like, you remember Sue, oh, you weren't here.
Yeah, and I was here when.
Yeah,
she was
so-
here, yeah.
She's a pretty bright woman, so, and she does a lot of public entity, right? And so those. Cause I'd have to, I couldn't be involved in it, but.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of resources like that,
Okay.
The train thing, right? I had the Zurich guy one time he goes, this is a bad location, man. That train, have you seen how long that train is? I didn't think about the train, but it was, in the south, you get those freight trains. And they
How
would
long-
They'll just shut down a fire department.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so, you've got all those resources. I don't know who the broker is for San Rafael. I could find out. But it's, you need to be leaning on him
Yeah.
or her.
Well,
Yeah.
they're getting paid to do a job. They should serve him.
Yeah, he should be
should
able
be
to
your
pick up
best
the phone and say, hey, listen, I'd like to meet with, who is my insurance carrier, right? Is it Swiss Re? Is it, Mitsui? Is it Zurich? Those are the big talented guys with all the resources in the world. Because there's guys that can give you all those numbers sitting somewhere, that some reinsurance guy knows everything about this town and your fire protection, along with, ISO.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
stay in contact
Yeah.
with you and I'll do some backdoor
Yeah.
research.
Great, thank you.
So those numbers you mentioned, $100,000 like for the archdiocese? was that
100
the-
million.
No, the value, not value,
The
but
values.
in terms of if they had a change of
If there
Class
was,
one.
There's a
25.
wildfire that came through San Rafael and it burned down Saint Isabella's,
Right.
Saint Vincent's, Saint Sylvester, Saint, the Saint Isabella's, Saint Anselm's,
Mhm.
Marin Catholic,
Yeah,
right? What was the number? It was $201 million worth of property values.
but just in
that's
terms of the
without-
insurance costs, the annual costs, if there's no incident,
So,
you said
So-
$100,000
so if I
delta.
take my rate, right, so the rate on that thing is a 19-cent rate, and
Yeah.
he loses protection class 1, that 19-cent rate is gonna go to a 22 or 23-cent rate.
Yeah,
That's the way it goes. If he becomes a protection class 5, then that 19-cent rate is now a 29, 32-cent rate,
okay.
right? That's just, because it's just a computer, they throw it in there.
Right.
And then they look at it and go schedule credits and things like that, but it's just a math equation.
So does that happen for residential as well?
Yeah, they look at the protection class.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the broader
Process.
impact, right, on every resident.
How often
the
do they
city.
do that review? Like right now we have class 1. When will they,
He answered it every 5 years.
so how much time do we have?
We're still in the middle of one right now that we're trying to clarify, right? But we haven't had a response from ISO.
Yeah, but his growth, like those community growths, they keep an eye on that. Like, that's their job.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, so
That's where they make the money, and it's where they're losing money.
Mhm.
it keeps us, it really, and it helps us stay alive because they're pushing, helping fire chiefs to say, I need this protection class 1.
Hmm.
Yeah, so anyway, that's, I worked with him on that and I worked with Stan on CERT.
Okay, good, thank you, good conversation. Commissioner Burford.
Do you want me to get into this?
Yeah, I know we're getting tight for time, and I think we probably should have had an agenda item for the subcommittee, right? Can you give us a quick update and then we'll make sure to get it on the
Yeah,
agenda
it,
next month?
in many ways, it is rather self-explanatory. In short, at the last meeting, which I'll say it this way, I attended that meeting 5 times just to make sure I was hearing what I was hearing, which is to say, I was there and took notes, and I reviewed the video 4 separate times. And the conversation that was going around the table was that, a conversation going around. We covered a lot of bases
Mhm.
and never really settled on a question. Not a criticism, it's a fact. That's what happened when we decided we need to talk about these things. Okay, let's talk about it. No, but there's this other issue.
Mhm.
It went around and around. That's what I'm saying. So I took it to Ed with some help from Chief Senate to talk to Sarah Zaragoza, who is our senior emergency preparedness coordinator, to find out what is the status with CERT. That was a question. The status is very simply this. For the city of San Rafael, it is being reorganized. Details inside, you read them. What I found out in looking into, because the chief has an interest in volunteers, this is out of your CAPS comment in Folsom, of is it possible to have volunteers within the department? It's going to come back to you answering a couple of questions. First, what can they do? What not? One, what do you want them to do? What can they do? Are they taking jobs away from people who are on staff? Don't want to do that. Are they stepping into areas that are controlled by labor regulations? You don't want to do that. What do you want them to do? Once you know, that builds a list and allows you to start a volunteer program in the department. Are there any volunteer programs in San Rafael? The answer is yes. There are page after page that I pulled off the web. Right there, they include Climate Action, Keep San Rafael Green, Friends of the Library, Farmers Market. Actually, the city kind of coordinates for AIM, Earth Day and community events, Adopt a Spot, all of those. Those are, and you can read about them in here, separate individual volunteer operations, not unlike what they're doing in Folsom. But there is a minor problem. No, it's a major problem. They all exist. We don't have anybody coordinating them, and none of them have been really fired up for the last 2 years. That's being worked on internally by a different office. We also had conversations at the table about getting information out to the public, wildfire preparedness, in amongst the things we do within the department through the Office of Emergency Services and all of the wildfire protection services we provide, how to get that information out. What I discovered, not by surprise, it's always been out there. Fire Safe Marin is a very well organized and graphically easy to take the source of presentations and material. And they have 3 things we don't have. Well, since they don't have, it's not a negative, it's just a fact of the matter. They have a budget and they have a staff. So if they sit down and say, we need signs for this, radio ads for that, TV spot for this, put this on YouTube, they've got people to do it. We don't, and we're not designed to. So what we should do is organize our thoughts to give to them to get it done and tap to the public. That instead of our going, well, I get a great idea, we need to do this on, banners on the side of, all right, fine, but who's going to do that? somebody who is already doing it can do it for us. Reference back then about CERT. In a nutshell, CERT is a national program which feeds the states, which feeds the counties, which feeds the cities. So there is a CERT design. What I got out of my conversation with Sarah was that the Marin version of CERT, which is for the entire county, was they have operations in various towns, was for a while also counting San Rafael as part and parcel of their operation. That will probably remain the same on paper, but the San Rafael CERT will be operated independently. It's in the process of being reorganized right now. So former volunteers, you could probably ring a bell and have some of them show up. But a new approach is being designed, so there will be a new CERT for San Rafael. Where else did I go? I think I probably said enough. What I did discover is, oh, yeah. And then there's the 500-pound gorilla who ate the room, MWPA. After their creation, they too have funding and staff and programs and material and are very aggressive at what they do in getting the word out. So it's to our advantage to get close to them and have some of their words be for us.
Well, then they should be invited to attend one of our meetings.
That's fine. I'm just saying that this is
That's a great idea.
this one report.
It's on their board.
So we've already been using them for stuff, as a matter of fact, so we're dealing with it right now because they roughly, Fire Safe Marin specifically, about $1 million that goes to them. They just increased to $1.2 million from the MWPA funds in there. So one thing that I've asked for is that they share the expectations that we have with it, to ensure that our word, what we want in there, in the writing in there. So it's a conglomerate of everybody else, so I just want to make sure that that the money we're investing in there, we're getting the outcome of it. So that's an important point that we're working on right now on there. But we are starting to leverage, well, we always have leveraged it. Now we're trying to leverage it specific to San Rafael to make sure that we're getting covered on the messaging you want to do. A big thing for us is the Spanish speaking part of it also, and we've been dealing with that part of it. So, which is unique to probably us in Novato only, but we're definitely pushing that as a priority for us. So yeah, the systems work and there's money there for it to do, and we're leveraging that system for sure. The CERT, just on we did get approval to reorganize both the Office of Emergency Services and the Vegetation Management, and I'm happy to say it got approved on was the last one? The last council meeting, was the last one or one before that? Or one of those two. So we're now going to full-time personnel, career personnel, which is going to make a world of difference. Some of the complaints that we had about CERT is that it's great that you guys start a program, but 6 months later or a year later, you guys stop it. And it is a true statement because our people go away. They just go, it's a fixed term position, they get their experience, they built a hell of a resume, and now they're on to much better. So now we'll be able to keep those career positions here, and hopefully not hopefully, we will be able to now have longevity with all those programs now, rather than just being frustrated every 6 months and having to do it recently. And it's a lot of work that needs to be done. It's just, we need career positions of folks that are gonna stay here and committed for long term. I'm definitely looking for that. And then the CERT is exactly what we're doing. It's basically using CERT as a baseline, however, modifying it to what our specific needs are here in the city. Because if you look at CERT, it is a national program that has all these components of it. Well, some of those we don't need, and it's not a priority. So let's concentrate on what our priority is here in the city and have it our own program type of deal. So it's a great, yeah, this is all great stuff that we're talking about moving forward.
And I think, to your point about last month's meeting, I think the context of the conversation was around, the potential for doing a citizen assistance program, right? And how how could that potentially leverage other volunteers or opportunities where volunteers are in the community?
The
But
Folsom program is listed in here.
yeah,
You can read about it.
right, that was one,
Yeah.
Donna, that I think you had mentioned.
The caps for.
Right, yeah. So I think that was the goal of last month. I'm not sure if that came through in the meeting, but if the chief and the department move forward with that type of program, us as commissioners, being able to support that in any, but not necessarily the commission doing that because
Right.
it's being done by the department. Okay,
Thank you.
all right, sounds great. Commissioner Chung.
Yeah, I had coffee with Kate Anderson, who is with our wildfire mitigation team. What I didn't know was that Measure C has an expiration date of 10 years. So my
10 years
question
from now?
from the
10
time
years
it
from
was
the-
passed, so 2030.
So are we 3 years into it now? 4 years?
5 years.
5 years into it now? So we only got 5 years.
So my question to Kate, and whenever I have coffee with, is like, what can the fire commission do for you? And her big point was, and we have to be advocates of re-upping this because it does have a shelf life. It came back to the office and talked to Thomas, and it's like, well, and I learned from Thomas that, yeah, there's so many measures that are coming on. And timing is a big deal on when they want to put it. Is it going to be a big turnout year or a not so big turnout year? Are there other measures? You can't ask for too much money in one election. So anyways, there's a lot of choices that the city has to make in terms of this. But the bottom line is that put it on your radar, put it on part of the strategic plan. Measure C has an expiration date and we need to re-up that in the next few years.
John, I'm sorry, I missed, what is it that's expiring? I didn't.
So
get-
Measure C is the grant,
Measure
the
C,
big,
thank
yeah,
you.
For the MWPA.
Okay, and then we talked about funding for the department as our needs change and if we want to increase services. Some hypotheticals, paramedic tax, things like that. And then I talked about, when we talked about funding and how it affects homeowners, that's when I reached out to Kent to help me about get a better understanding of insurance ratings. How does it affect? He gave me the example of the diocese and their money, but what about the individual homeowner? He gave me some, let's relate it so close to home. So we need to educate homeowners that when the time comes and we need resources that increase our budget, which is our end game, how it's going to affect
Yes.
them.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last thing was for public education, we said perhaps instead of having firehouses, we can have pop-up fire showcases. For instance, like going out to Lockwood Marina / Annie's Market, the fireboat there. We should bring the engine truck, people shop fireboat, have a lot of kids events, a lot of families. We don't have to do it at the firehouse, but just to be present for 2 or 3 hours. That's kind of our.
I have a question. The gentleman that presented today talked about, rather than using firefighters as paramedics, but some cities are taking and creating their own paramedic subset. I don't know how to say it, chief.
Single role paramedics.
So would the paramedic tax allow for
So-
that?
Perhaps of that, but there's a little bit of a danger there, meaning that we decrease the firefighting force that we have available.
Okay.
Single role is like San Francisco has. You have people hired to be on the ambulance and they stay in the ambulance. They're not cross-trained as firefighters. They're paramedic only. They don't respond to medical.
Okay, so what you're saying, chief, is that's not a road we want to go down.
I don't think so, because we're so small that we'd have to depend on each other like that. If we were a large organization that could hire, 100 paramedics and 100 firefighters, then we'd be fine.
Okay.
But we're not that organization. We have
Okay.
to cross-train them. Which subsequently is a little bit more expensive because they're doing the dual role, but I think at the end of the day, they're doing dual,
Better solution.
in my opinion.
Well,
That's my report.
Okay, that's fine.
do we know what the paramedic tax is gonna be?
No, we're working on that
Okay.
part of it.
And how does that need to go before the voters?
Yes. Oh, very much so.
So we'll go in the November ballot.
We're seeing if we hope to go to the November ballot. We'll see.
But again, like Thomas said, it's all about timing.
Yeah, you could put it on a primary ballot too, right?
Yep.
Correct.
and see what we're gonna ask for also. What's the range that we
Right.
want for?
And turnout's very different, primaries versus
Yeah, correct.
generals and presidentials versus
Yeah.
midterm,
Mhm.
yeah, it gets complicated. Okay, Commissioner Kusker.
So, I wanted to share with the commission that Firefighters Without Borders is making another journey this year. This year, they're going to Manzanillo, Mexico. There are 13 firefighters that are going, 7 from San Rafael, 1 from Ross, 3 from British Columbia, and 2 from Los Angeles, which is kind of an interesting consortium, given the political horizon we're dealing with right now, that we've got Canada jumping in with the United States going to Mexico. I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. I mean, that's great that they're all going together. They're gonna work with 50 to 60 volunteer firefighters and obviously do training for safety and survival, auto extraction, firefighting tactics and techniques, incident management, and more. So I'm gonna be asking the foundation again this year if they would like to make a contribution, because it's all out of their pocket, the respective firefighters, but I think it's pretty impressive that we've got 7 coming from San Rafael.
Yep.
So it's Firefighters Without Borders, California. If you ever want to look it up on the internet, they've got their own website. So, pretty good.
Right. Was that the group that Larry was involved with?
Yes,
Yeah,
Larry
okay.
Luckham was the one that first brought it to the foundation.
Yeah,
And I'm sure it had a lot to do with where he lives and his interaction with the Hispanic community. He's pretty tight.
Yeah.
So,
okay. All right, thank you. That's all the commissioner reports and the chief's report.
Chief?
Go ahead.
Just in the interest of time, the chief's report this month just has maybe some helpful information. It stands for itself. I won't go into it. You can just read it at your convenience. If you have any questions, you can certainly ask me, but it's just some basic information. The 2 documents that I handed out during the meeting are basically just informational pieces for you. The first one, major projects with potential impact to fire and EMS service delivery, kind of dovetails into Rodney's presentation. It just shows you the potential impact, the high density construction that Santa Fe is potentially facing over the next 10 or 15 years, which is quite substantial. So just give you an idea, kind of gives you a basis during your conversations,
Yes.
possibly with electeds, as to what we might be facing as far as an increase in service demand based on high density development. And then the other document is really just treated as notes, because this is work in progress. I'm still working on this, but it kind of gives you some talking points regarding the water system, which that has come up in conversation after the LA fires. Everybody wants to know about our water system. What kind of water system do we have? So I've just done a kind of a basic explanation of the water system, firefighting operations on the back page, evacuation and wildfire mitigation. So just some talking points, or just use it as notes. It's not a document that I want it circulated simply because I'm still working on this, trying to fine tune it to make it as useful as possible, but it's for your information. And that concludes my report, and I'll turn it back to the chief.
I have a question. And I imagine it's gonna be resolved after the gentleman today presents to council. But are we a go forward that we're still intending to build a firehouse at the Northgate Mall location?
No,
That's off the table now?
at this point, yeah, it is.
Okay. Right. And that's because?
Just don't know.
That was an easy answer.
No, and one of the things that I'll tell you this right now, to me, almost the fire stations that we have now, if we have more fire stations, we dilute. We want to actually add density to the fire stations, because with as the city gets denser, we need to build density in our responses also. And like the example I gave you one day of the structure that we have now, single story structure, is no longer a single story structure. It's at least a 4-story, but more than likely a lot taller than that. So the amount of resources we need to go fight a fire or even a medical aid there, we need a lot more folks to be able to do that work.
So what you're saying is bulk up the firehouses we already have,
Correct.
and are they designed to accommodate?
No.
No, that's
So it'll be, everything's complicated, nothing's
Yeah.
easy.
Nothing-
Yeah.
But so unfortunately, what we use is the 2040 master plan, is that what it's called? I think it was called master plan, that basically said that there was no expected growth. This was done several years ago. Well, come RENA, come everything like that, that has definitely changed. So now this is what started the standards of cover study. This has caused us to kind of regroup and kind of figure out where we're at. With that being said, I also think we're in a safe spot right now that we are able to make the difference with budgeting, operation and stuff like that, that we won't get to the point where I was in my previous organization, where our unit hour utilization was. So unit hour utilization is how much the company is actually working per hour. We say that anything over 30% is just overloaded. Basically, the folks aren't getting their meal, they're not doing training, they're just basically running calls on there. So there, even the engine companies were at 60% UHU, and the ambulances were way above that. So, and it's still to this day, they still haven't augmented their responses, even though the report's out there. So we don't want to be in that situation. We want to be in the situation that we see it ramping up. We're very aware of the development, and I believe now we can actually make a difference. So we won't ever get to that point, and we don't sacrifice the service that we're providing to the community by doing that.
You get ahead of it.
Correct.
So thinking of Terra Linda specifically, since we're not gonna do a new firehouse at Northgate Mall, are we gonna build up the existing firehouse that's there?
So right now, what we saw so eventually we'd like to put additional staff in there for sure. What we saw there is that with the calculations that Ronnie's group put together, it's about a 2% increase in call volume there. That's about it. Our current that station 56 is about 8% right now. So they're nowhere near the 30 percentile. So even if they had to absorb 2%, even 5% is still within their capacity that they have there.
So we keep this firehouse as it is.
Correct.
And we weren't gonna add an additional station, we were gonna physically
I
relocate
knew
station
that.
56.
Yeah,
That was gonna be
now
repositioned
it's
to
a
a more
keeper.
central location.
for now, it's.
For now, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, perhaps in a year, in 5 years from now, there's further.
Might be a
development.
different story.
Correct.
Understood.
But it's us. I mean, what I reinforced from this one is that we have to be astute as to what's going on. We can't just let stuff happen. We got to be part of that. That's
Yeah.
why, like I say, I think I haven't talked to Chief Senate on this, but I think as we're having this conversation, I think it makes sense for us to redo this. Make modifications every year but redo the whole thing every 3 years so that there's a fresh set of
Right.
information for us to there.
And just so you know, we had ESCI about 6 months
I
ago
remember.
actually
Yep.
break off into a sub-study for Northgate Town Square development to really just drill down and see what would be needed. And based on their study, they indicated that there wouldn't be a significant increase in call volume that was not necessary to move the station just for that standalone project. Now, when you look at this
Yeah.
as a
changes the
whole, now
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
potentially gonna change the picture, but for Northgate Town Square, there wasn't a need just based on that project alone to relocate the station.
Is Northgate Mall going forward? Are they,
Yes,
is it happening?
there's a demolition permit that's been issued for the Sears building.
So it's starting
It is.
2026?
Mhm.
That's what we believe it.
Yeah, well, they're gonna
Yeah.
start demo this year, 2025.
I've seen many projects that never go.
I know.
So-
That's why I
So-
asked.
When you do that, that was a great example. I used that example yesterday when I met with that guy, John Chino. When you do that's just taking resources, right? So how do you make the translation? Because they're responding to them and they have to go up the stairs for a paramedic call, right? But it's impacting the fire protection.
Correct. So it's also for fire calls. So, and always get the argument for developers where it's a modern building, it's got
It's
sprinklers.
like, yeah, all
I
that
get
stuff.
that stuff.
But that's not the point of what you're making.
Correct. We still need boots on the ground to be able to make that launch up there. They're not gonna use the elevators because we're not supposed to use elevators. If there's hose lines, we still have to put hose lines in there. Sprinklers just intended to control the fire. It's not full extinguishment.
Yeah.
We have to have boots on the ground going there, full extinguishment.
Yeah, because what you're saying is you're eating up my resources, so I can't fight a house fire,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that is also, so every medical aid.
And the medicals,
Yeah, that's the other thing that I don't have, as soon as I get a medical, I don't have a firefighting force anymore. It
That's
gets
right.
decreased,
and you could have two in that place.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but if I have density, then I have the same amount of firefighters, but now, same apparatus, but now I've built density into each station to be able to.
More
So
firefighters.
This morning at about 8:30 AM, a medical call was dispatched in zone 57. That's an engine and an ambulance. Then about 3 minutes later, there was a medical aid call in zone 52. That's an engine and an ambulance. And then 5 minutes later, there was another call dispatched for a collision on 101. That's another engine ambulance battalion chief. So in the course of like 10 minutes, most of our agency was now committed to medical calls, not fires, medical calls, but that's an engine and an ambulance minimum for each one of those calls.
We have an
And that
aging,
happened in 10 minutes.
and we have an aging population, you know.
Population.
Yep, we always say the 8 AM CPR, that's like a regular occurrence. People wake up, you know, and, or not wake up.
Woke up with a heart attack.
Yeah.
Chief, why are they not allowed to use the elevators? I think I know why, but
Well, just on fires, it's just when there's a fire there,
failed.
there's gonna be a short in there and
Yeah.
like that. So we try not, I should say we don't use them. We try not to. Once we get to super high story ones, there's split banks that we could actually do. So we could split it so that they could actually go up a certain distance and then they have to walk up. But there was a fairly significant incident in Oakland about 3 years ago where 2 firefighters almost died by taking the elevator. Elevator opens up, there's an active fire. And mind you, this is actually a fairly open area, but there was a couch that was burning on the exterior stairwell. And basically there was a current of air pushing it. And all the products of combustion were right there in the elevator shaft. So as soon as they opened up, it was 2 out of the 3 like had instant reactions where they passed out. The one kid that was a brand new firefighter was the one that was able to get his mask on fast enough.
Wow.
So that's why we don't use them.
Did the other two make it?
Yeah, but barely. Like they're fine now, but it was definitely
Touch
touch
and
and go
go,
that night.
yeah.
I was on duty that night and actually sent some people down there to go assist them as fast as possible. So.
That's scary. Okay, Chief, anything else? In the report?
Just to let you know, the fire maps came out, the fire severity zone maps, and that's been a hot topic on us. For us, it's a hot topic, but just know that we'd already, most of our regulations are already, so we're not looking for it.
Well, they're in place. We've had our vegetation management ordinance is citywide.
Mhm.
So the maps don't really change anything. We enforce our vegetation regardless of whether you're in a WUI zone. A state designated area, anything. So it doesn't really change anything that we're doing.
Okay,
And it'll be the zone 0, that'll be coming up also, but we believe that we're also ahead of on that one also. And then there'll be a WUI fire code that comes out, I believe, next year also. So all those things, I think we're in a far better situation than most jurisdictions around the Bay Area now. And then all the aggressive work that Quinn's team's done for over the last 4 or 5 years has definitely helped us. So I think our shock load to the system will be a lot less than other jurisdictions, but nonetheless, it is a particular hot topic right now.
okay, all right. The final item is next month's meeting. Can we alternate? So we're going back to
Sure.
a station?
Sure, we can do that, absolutely. We'll determine what station
Yeah,
and get that out to you so you know you can plan for it.
okay. Right, that sounds great. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for
you.
going over. It was a action-packed meeting with a lot of good stuff, so thank you.
you.
We are adjourned.
At 5:42.
I got some question. That's a volunteer. So let's say we have.
I get a favor for one of the writers.
Bring food, because it's gonna be.
There's 2 of them.
No, still be good use whatever
Yeah.
They're commercial.
Yeah, more like.
They have them
I do now.